welcome to our next Encore live presentation. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's going to be part 2 of Mack the Knife and the Wild Years of Berlin. I'm your host again, James Smith, Regional Director at Encore Tours, and on behalf of all of us at Encore, we'd like to thank you so much for being with us here today. Just to remind everyone on the webinar format, all attendees are muted throughout the presentation. However, we do want this to be interactive, so please use the question and answer box that you should find at the bottom of your screen to send us any questions or comments, and we'll follow up on those after the webinar. Additionally, this is being recorded and will be available to watch on our blog tomorrow. We do hope you've been enjoying the Encore Live webinar series. Between our global officers and tour managers, we've certainly enjoyed making them. It never ceases to be fun, we think, learning the unknown and less familiar histories of music, composers, of performances, especially coming from their original homelands. Last week, we gained an excellent insight into 1920s Berlin, how society needed an artistic outlet and voice following the decimation caused by World War I, and through Bertolt Brecht and the Threepenny Opera and Kurt Weill's music, Mack the Knife was born. Today, we're going to dive deeper into Kurt Weill's composition itself and see how the popularity of Mack the Knife took off worldwide. Once again, to lead us on this fascinating journey and joining us all the way from Europe is going to be our presenter and longtime Encore tour manager, Markus Stuckelberger. Hello, Markus.
Hello, everyone. Nice to be with you.
Hello, how are you doing? Last week, Markus, everyone is in the south of France, and last week was picking grapes. Have you picked them all, Markus?
Yes, we picked them all. 5.8 tons we picked.
Oh my, 5.8 tons, wow. Mm-hmm. Picked, bottled and drunk.
Well, there's enough to drink for a while, yes.
Great. Okay, fantastic. Well, Markus, or as we know, Mack from last week's presentation, take us back into the world of this famous tune.
Great. Okay, I will start my PowerPoint presentation now. Okay, so as James said, yes, last week I talked about Berlin in the 20s. Today I'm going to talk to you about what happened afterwards. So it's a journey that will take us to America, to New York. And I just would like to talk to you about how I divided up this talk tonight. So first we will talk about the premiere of Threepenny Opera. We're nearly there because last week I talked to you about some mishaps during the rehearsals, and I will certainly continue that. Then there is going to be another war, as we know, and there is going to be the threat of Hitler, and as many artists were Jewish, I will follow a little bit the story of these artists, of these actors who were involved in the Threepenny Opera in Mack the Knife. And then there will be a little analysis of the song, of the score itself, and we'll finish with Mack Comes to America, the success story of the song as soon as it came to the United States. Here on the right, by the way, is the score of Seeräuber Jenny, of Pirate Jenny, which is part of the Threepenny Opera. It's always fascinating to see a composer's handwriting. So this is Kurt Weill's handwriting of the Threepenny Opera. Just to recap a little bit of what I talked about last week, I talked about the fact that Berlin in the 1920s was a very special place. Many people there, but we have to remember it's the end of World War I. 1.7 million Germans were killed during the war. And of course, Germany lost a lot of territory, lost the war. And we're now in a period that is called the Weimar Republic, with Berlin being the capital city of that new Germany. Now, when you've just lost a war, when things look drab, when you see lots of war veterans in the streets, lots of beggars, crime is rising, well, you try to forget the past. The future doesn't look rosy either, because inflation is looming, depression is looming. So what do? You live in the present. And this is really the frame of this whole period. We talked about the golden years of Berlin. I prefer the expression the wild years of Berlin, never came back to Berlin nor to Europe. This was a special period where people wanted to live in the present, no limits at all. And the nightlife literally exploded with, for example, 300 cinemas. In a short time, 300 theaters, cabarets, and nightclubs opened. And there was just an incredible dynamic in this city. Of course, it ended up with what we call decadence. People got drunk, there was drugs, as there was no limits, the atmosphere got crazy. And this is really the basis of this play, the Threepenny Opera, with Mack the Knife as a very important part in this production. And here we are back in the Theater am Schiffbauerdamm, which is the theater where the Threepenny Opera was premiered. And we had 4 days before the opening night. And last week I talked to you about the creation of the song Mack the Knife, the creation which really was more or less by accident. Because what happened 4 days before the first night was that this gentleman, who is called Harald Paulsen, and he's is cast as Mack the Knife. He's cast as Mack the Knife, and he is known in Berlin because he's a heartthrob, blonde hair, blue eyes, and he appeared in several productions before. But he didn't think he didn't really realize that playing in the Threepenny Opera, he would be playing Mack the Knife, a criminal, an ugly man, somebody who was vile, who was evil. And it took him a long time to realize that actually that doesn't go with his persona. And 4 days before the first night, he refused to perform. He said, I'm only going to perform with my blue silken tie and my costumes. I'm only going to perform in what people know of me as the heartthrob. And so, goodbye, I'm going to quit. That was a problem for Bertolt Brecht and Kurt Weill because they counted on Paulsen, because Harald Paulsen was famous and they wanted to bring in audience for the show. So Bertolt Brecht and Kurt Weill got together and overnight they composed Mack the Knife. They composed Mack the Knife, and they called it the Morita von Mecki Messer. The idea was that you would have it's a sort of tradition in popular song in Germany, that you would have somebody explaining crimes or disaster in the area, and they would have somebody with a barrel organ, another actor, who would introduce Mack the Knife as the villain. And so you would have a song that would open the show telling us how awful the deeds were of Mack the Knife. When Paulsen heard that he could continue performing as usual, he accepted. But that was not the only problem. The problems continued. The First Lady, no, first of all, I would quite like to talk about the Morita. What is a Morita? Because some people ask me, you know, where does that word come from? It probably comes from mortus, from death, or from moral, morality, a play. It's something that happened in the 18th, 19th century in all the cities of Germany. You would have a barrel organ player, grinder here, who would appear in the middle of a market town. You would have somebody who prepared big drawings, pictures of events that they wanted to sing about. And there's actually somebody here who is distributing the text, the lyrics of the songs. The basis of these Moritaten were that the songs themselves were, the melodies were very simple, but there would be 5, 6, 10, 12, 20 verses telling about all these different murders, accidents, disasters that happened in the area. For example, here they tell you about an earthquake. You can see a statue falling down here. Here a flood. You can see people on the roofs of the houses. And basically, was a way to inform the people what happened, sort of like the sensational press. So that was the idea, the concept of a Morita. And it's very important to remember that, because it is an integral part of a Mack the Knife, of the Threepenny Opera. So I'll come back to the disasters before the first night. We had Carolanea here, who was cast as the female lead. Unfortunately, Carola's husband died 2 weeks before the rehearsal started. She insisted to continue rehearsing, even though she had other things in her mind. But she became difficult about a week before the first night, saying, oh, can you change this? I don't like the text here. I would like to have a more important role here in this scene. And so Brecht and Weil did everything possible to please her. But about 4 days before the first night, again, she said, no way, I'm not going to continue. You can do it without me. She leaves and doesn't come back. The theater owner is terribly upset because he really needs her as well to bring in the money. So he himself goes to her apartment with a bunch of flowers, but he's not even let in. So what shall we do? Well, we have to find another performer, and a girl called Roma Bahn was replacing Carolanea for the first few performances. I say first few performances because Carolanea realized that actually, that she was jealous, that she would like to be on stage, and she came back on stage later on. Roma Bahn, who replaced her, did do very well because she had very good reviews and she did a very good career afterwards. So that's problem number 2. Problem number 3, we're now at the dress rehearsal, the last night before the first night. And everybody was screaming at each other. They had to literally cut 45 minutes off the show. And the show ends with this very pompous, very important entrance of a messenger on a horse. So you can see the messenger arriving on the horse, and here underneath the gallows, you see Mack the Knife. And the idea is that the messenger will bring a message from the Queen saying, Mack the Knife is pardoned. For Bertolt Brecht, this is an extremely important moment, because he wanted to show the Deus ex machina idea, which was that lies, crimes, and the evil will always be forgiven as long as there is corruption among the powerful. So that was the idea. He wanted to be sure that people understood this idea, and therefore Deus ex machina, you had to have a machine to explain that. Now, the horse arrives with the messenger and capsized, literally into the auditorium. Thank God the messenger didn't get hurt, but the horse had to be scrapped. It was literally on rails and it didn't work, just a technical fault. Brecht got furious. He said, no, I'm not going to continue, because this was the clue of the whole thing. Well, finally, they managed to convince Brecht it was all right. The messenger could have a special light effect. You can see it here. Here is the messenger without a horse. He just is standing on a little box. It looks actually he's standing on what the horse left behind. But, this was the only effect they could think of. Here he is, the messenger saying, Mack the Knife, you're pardoned. So this problem got more or less solved, but it continues. First night. The actors only had about 5 hours, 6 hours to sleep, because the dress rehearsal went until about 10 in the morning. So the show starts with Mack the Knife. And the person who sings the song is Kurt Geron, very famous person in Berlin as well, mainly in the cabaret circles. And Kurt Geron starts to turn the handle and nothing happens. The barrel organ is broken. So he starts to sing without the organ, and thank God in the right key, because the orchestra helped him out from the second verse. So terrible. Yes, it didn't work. And probably the audience realized that there was something wrong. So after he's done his song, eerie silence. Nobody clapped. Everybody expected applause, because we're talking about a mixture between cabaret and opera and play, and after cabaret numbers, you applauded. Nothing. So this continues. Second song, nothing applause, no applause. Third, fourth, a disaster, they think, but no. Suddenly after the fourth song, the audience realizes the irony that everything was meant the opposite way, and they love it. They love it so much that they want encores of each song. So great. And we come to the interval. Everybody is pleased. Everybody is pleased, and we have time to relax a bit, except Kurt Weill. He goes down the program notes here, looking for Lotelenia, the love of his life. Jenny is not here. They've forgotten to put Lotelenia on the program. And he's furious. Kurt Weill really, one says he's actually never been as furious as that in all of his life. And he says, Lotte is not going back on the stage for the second half. We just scrapped the show. But Lotelenia answered, yes, I will go back on the stage. Of course I will. But tomorrow morning, everybody will ask, who was that girl who played Jenny? And I will be famous. And she was right. She became famous. So here is Lotelenia when she was about the age when she performed Threepenny Opera. So here we have the end of the first night, and a huge success. People loved it, and very soon the theater was full every night for 100 performances in a row. Became the most successful show in Berlin. Before I continue, and I would like to analyze the song a little bit from the musical point of view, before we do that, I would quite like to accompany these actors, actresses during the next few years, because as we know, we are now in 1928. In 1933, Hitler is taking over the power and Germany becomes a dictatorship. So bye-bye Weimar Republic, hello dictatorship. So we say goodbye to Berlin for most of the actors and actresses. And I find the destiny of these actors and actresses really a mirror image of what happened to Europe between 1933 and 1945. So here we start with the most important people in our story, Kurt Weill and Bertolt Brecht. This is a picture of Kurt Weill in New York, because Kurt Weill managed to escape to New York. And who is this? It's Lotelenia. So here they're together, working together on a show. It's my favorite picture of the two. I think it's great. You know, the attention, the concentration. You often see Kurt Weill working with the pipe, and just how awake you see Lotelenia is here. Then here is Bertolt Brecht, cool dude. He escaped to America as well. He, though, wanted to return to America, to Europe as soon as possible, and in 1948 returned to East Berlin. Meanwhile, Kurt Weill and Lotelenia stayed in the United States. Kurt Weill immediately refused to be recognized as a German. He said, I want to be American, and got American citizenship immediately. So did Lotelenia. And they stayed in New York. They never went back to Germany. So we come to the next person, Kurt Geron, the man who played the barrel organ. He actually played several roles in the Threepenny Opera. He was a very important character. Kurt Geron was Jewish, and he was sent to a concentration camp, which is called Theresienstadt. This concentration camp was used for propaganda of the Third Reich as a sort of to show the world that the concentration camps were all right, that the elderly were looked after, the children were looked after, and that the musicians and other artists could do what they always did. Hitler basically asked Kurt Geron that he should do a film about the happy time in the concentration camp, and Kurt Geron was forced to do this film. And in fact, Theresienstadt is a concentration camp you can still visit. It's on the Czech-German border. So if you go from Berlin to Prague, you will go through Theresienstadt. And when you visit the museum there, you'll be able to see that propaganda film that Kurt Geron was forced to film. Of course, the tragic story is that as soon as they filmed, as soon as the film was finished, all the actors, and Kurt Geron as well, were sent to Auschwitz, where all of them were murdered. So a very tragic story, but as I said, it is a way to look at European history, to understand European history. Now, in contrary, Harald Paulsen was not Jewish, and he played the cards of playing the card of Hitler. He had quite a glorious career until about 1943. He was a famous film actor during the Third Reich. Now, the probably saddest story is Carola Neher. Do you remember? She lost her husband just before the first night. She threw her wobblies before the first night. She came back on stage. She was one of the most beautiful women in Berlin in the 30s. And she married a Russian. In fact, she remarried. She married the Russian teacher, and they had a son together, and they both escaped to Moscow. Now, her husband was a Trotskyist, and here is Trotsky. And of course, at one point, Trotsky wasn't in anymore. In fact, any Trotskyist was persecuted. So were the three was her husband, and he was executed. Meanwhile, the son was sent to an orphanage, and she was sent to a gulag, where she died about 2 years later. So the tragic story of Carola Neher. So that was before 1945, and Berlin looked like this in 1945. Not much was left over. Now, all these different stories, all these different destinies, and most of the actors didn't meet again. But one thing continued, the show. The show must go on. The music of the Threepenny Opera continued. And what is amazing is that in 1945, the first show that was performed again in bombed out Berlin, in this bombed out theater, was, of course, the Threepenny Opera. So here we are. This is now enough history, and I will now talk a little bit about the music, the score itself, and we will look a little bit at the composition. I'm going to show you a little video that I've recorded a few days ago, because I haven't got a piano up here. I had to record it beforehand, which will tell you about the composition, and we'll do a little analysis. So here it is. So let's have a look at the composition, and we start with the melody. Now, the song was written in C major, and we start the melody with the third, which is the E, continue with the fifth, which is the G, and then the sixth, which is the A. So that creates this sound. Now, this combination of notes is not unusual. We have a famous song that uses exactly those three notes and goes like this. In C major. Oh, nice, very comforting, but Kurt Weill wasn't there to make you feel at ease. No, it's a song about a criminal, and therefore he insisted to finish the phrase on the sixth, and the sixth, the A, is not part of the chord of C major, so that sounds like this. There's already this tension. So he continues. It's exactly the same thing, he repeats the same phrase. He changes the chord to D minor. Sounds a bit better already because the A is part of the chord of D minor. He continues, but this time he decides the first two notes will be one note below. So he does. But where will he end up? On the A. And he decides that is a nice G7 chord. But still is there. And he finishes again with the C. If you the feeling of the barrel organ, he superimposes the major and the minor. That means C minor and the equivalent, sorry, C major and the equivalent in minor, A minor, which means it goes like this. Und der Haifisch. Can you see it's like instrument that is out of tune, which of course barrel organs often are, and gives you this feeling of unrest. Now the second part of the song, there he breaks away from that A and he goes higher up, and you sort of breathe a sigh of relief, and he continues liberation, and not only to the liberation, he gives you a very nice chord. The A minor. But then he continues and he gives you this jump, this big jump, which is not quite an octave, and it makes you feel uneasy again, and he repeats that jump again. And then he finishes the song, and we all would like to finish it no, what he does, he finishes it with, and of course with the combination of A minor and C major. So the barrel organ continues, the song continues, and you can add verses after verses because the song never finishes. Okay, well, I hope you followed that. We're now going to do the big jump to America. Now, the Threepenny Opera did not have a big success in the 1930s in America. It worked very well in the whole of Europe, but for some reason, it didn't work in America. Why? I don't know. It's probably because the Americans weren't quite prepared for the cynicism of the Germans. There was just something that didn't quite click, and so after 10 performances the Broadway run was closed, was cancelled, and it really, one forgot about it. We have to think as well about the fact that Threepenny Opera can be interpreted as an anti-capitalist song, and during the McCarthy era it wouldn't have been the right moment to perform this show. So we have to wait until the 1950s, and in 1952 Leonard Bernstein conducts a new American version with lyrics, with new lyrics by Mark Blitzstein. And in 1954, the same show goes to the Theatre de Lys, and it's one of the most successful, I think actually the most successful off-Broadway show in New York. In the cast, we have Lotte Lenya. Now, do you remember, Kurt Weill died in 1950, so we're talking about Lotte Lenya being very, very involved in the continuation of Kurt Weill's work. Then in 1955, finally, the Threepenny Opera makes it to Broadway. Suddenly a huge success, catchy tunes, people were starting to whistle Mack the Knife, and it was quite obvious that somebody will record that song. And that somebody, you probably know, is Louis Armstrong, who records Mack the Knife in September 1955. He actually recorded Mack the Knife 7 times. It was such a big success. So what I would quite like to show you here is a picture of the production in off-Broadway in the Theatre de Lys. And just looking at the picture, you can see a transformation in the atmosphere. This doesn't look like the performance of the Schiffbauerdamm. It's different. What is different is already the decor. There, the oldie Europe decor with a harp, with an armor, champagne. And here is Mack the Knife. Well, he still looks smart, as we know he has to look smart, but the bride's dress is a bit too avancé. It's a bit too show business for Europeans, but I think it's very important because it's only because of this that the song moved on. And this whole change of atmosphere is very visible in Mark Blitzstein's translation and the lyrics. So here we look at his text. In German, it only says, "And the shark has teeth." That's the first verse. In the English version, perhaps because of scanning to fill, there are a few fill words, pretty dear oh. But what I think is disturbing a little bit is the O. Why? Because I explained Mack the Knife is a Moritat. A Moritat is something you just add verses after verses, and therefore it was very important for Brecht to start the first song of the show with and that was an important element of the show. You start a show with and, so you know things have happened before. So it was replaced with O. The other thing that is interesting is to see twice the word dear appears. Well, do you remember in the Morita, you've got people in the streets sort of listening to the song of the organ grinder, but you don't have an audience, and you don't have this intimacy. You're not talking about somebody you're singing a song to, not a deer that is nearby. No, it is a public song. So that's again moving away from the original idea. Then the shark has pretty teeth. Pretty. Do you think that's ironical? I don't know. Why don't we use another word like scary, massive? I don't know, but something else that would correspond more to the original version. But I think the original version was dead. You know, I don't think the Threepenny Opera and Dreigroschen Opera, the original, has weathered in the, how it looks like, the text and the songs, they weathered well, but actually the mise en scène, the staging of it, wouldn't have continued. So I think it's very important to have this new American venture, this new American idea, make it perhaps cozier. Perhaps it's somebody singing a song to the loved one about a nasty person, that's all. And so I think this change of atmosphere is extremely important. So now I would like to talk about the famous recordings of Mack the Knife. And of course, we've been waiting a long time to see him. Perhaps you remember, the people who was listening to me last week, I said that the reason why I started to play the trumpet was Louis Armstrong, and most likely this song, Mack the Knife. It's as I said, 1955 recording. It was in the hit parade for 20 weeks. It was a big hit. And perhaps you know that Louis Armstrong transformed Mark Blitzstein's text as well. He added text, including telling us about all the characters in the show of the Threepenny Opera, including Lotte, not in her role as Jenny, but as Lotte. So this was a big success. We're talking September 1955. And then 1958, Bobby Darin's rock and roll interpretation of Mack the Knife. I love it because it's very simple. It's what Courtois would have loved. It's just being very economic, and that was a big success. The Grammy Award of the Best Record of the Year, wonderful. And then Mack the Knife comes back to Berlin, not as Mackie Messer, but as Mack the Knife, sung by Ella. This is 1960, very famous concert. And there's a very sweet story that Ella Fitzgerald was nervous about the song. She just learned it. And in the plane to Berlin, she tried to remember the lyrics. The concert starts. She starts to sing, and she loses it, and she sort of doesn't remember the text. She starts to scat, and the song finishes with, "And Ella and her fellows were making a wreck of Mack the Knife." The audience loves it. Great. And that sense of humor, I think, is very important. So we can see that the song got transformed. It's now standing on its own. You can have the song without thinking about Threepenny Opera. It made it back to Berlin. And what we will remember, perhaps more than Threepenny Opera, is Mack the Knife. For this, she won 3 Grammy Awards. Now, my question is, why did the jazz adopted this song? And I think one big reason, one reason is that you've got very short musical phrases, da 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 da, and then you have a break. And I think what is interesting about that break gives opportunity for especially Dixieland musicians, New Orleans musicians, to do a little improvisation. So you've got this little echo, this little response. It's a tradition. It's a tradition, of course, in blues as well, in gospel. And, you have it, for example, in St. James's Infirmary. I went down to St. James Infirmary. You have a space to evolve, to bring in an instrument. And so I think that's one reason why Mack the Knife was used first for jazz. And what I think is very interesting as well, that you've got the possibility as well to play with this sixth. It's a very unusual interval, like I explained to you beforehand. So basically, this has become part of the jazz standards. And I don't know how many recordings do exist from bebop style to New Orleans. So I will finish the lecture with a little film that I made about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, with my band. We are at the moment working on a show that shows you exactly that, the transposition or the transition between a song that was written in German, starts in Berlin, and then moves into moves to America. What I think is interesting, that you have a song that started out being very square. You've got the barrel organ and the square rhythm, and suddenly with the swing rhythm, with it, people want to dance, tap their feet. You've got syncopation. You want to move. So I think the most important thing in this transformation of this song is you've got a song which was written for information, to inform the audience, and it has become a song to dance to. So let's have a look at this little video. But beforehand, I would like to thank you for listening to me. And I would like to thank as well Kate, my wife, and very experienced Encore tour manager, who helped me very much with a PowerPoint demonstration and helped me with the presentation in general. So thank you. So before I leave you, I just want to say what Kurt Weill would say before going away. Goodbye, and let's music become language.
Und die einen sind im Dunkeln und die anderen sind im Licht. Doch man sieht nur die im Lichte, die im Dunkeln sieht man nicht.
Thank you, Markus.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was absolutely excellent. I love the Louis Armstrong at the end.
I know the film cut me off too early. I want to do that little scat bit, but the filmmaker just cut me off saying he can't sing like Louis Armstrong. They're tough.
Oh, no. It was brilliant. That was so good. What a great, great journey. Thank you so much, Markus, for taking us through that. Did Kurt Weill get to hear Bobby Darin, Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald?
No, unfortunately not. But
passed away.
No, unfortunately not. But I would say that he would actually have loved it, because the most important thing, do you remember right at the beginning I said Kurt Weill said there's only good and bad music. And what he said, music is wasted if it's not listened to. So I think he was very aware of the fact that, you know, these versions would have been great. Now, unfortunately, Kurt Weill died in 1950 and has never heard it. I hope he hears it up there in heaven.
Right. And remind us, I think you talked about this in part one, but why was it called the Threepenny Opera? Was it
no, I actually didn't talk about that. Well, drei Groschen means you haven't got any money. The idea was that the opera, which wasn't an opera, of course, which was a play, would be a play played by beggars who were begging for threepenny. So beggars are performing for beggars. So that's why it's quite interesting to see how the productions in New York didn't take that into account. You know, it was supposed to be dirty. It was supposed to be the underworld, and they were playing for other people who were poor.
Right. All right. Interesting. Do you know if we've got a couple of questions actually while you were giving the presentation, which is great. So I'll just read off a couple of those. Do you know if the sinister theme influence, well, whether it influenced other genres at the time?
The theme, you mean the theme of crime and of gangsters and of the underworld?
Yeah, exactly. And bring something like, you know, Mack the Knife, the music and the lyrics to other.
Well, I think what is quite interesting, of course, there are lots of, you know, horror movies and gangster films and all that would sort of do the same thing. But I think what is very interesting in Mack the Knife, that the origin of the song has this circus feeling about it. And the circus feeling gives you always a sort of a distance to the gruesomeness, you know, and I've just been watching a few videos of what is basically steampunk illustration music, where you've got this cabaret feeling, this this circus music again, telling you gruesome things. And I think that's interesting. I mean, I know, for example, well, other artists like, doesn't come into mind, but people who've actually taken all other songs by Kurt Weill and made them even more gruesome, the contrary of what I was talking, like Tom Waits, for example. I don't know whether you know Tom Waits' Alabama song, which is a great example of him taking a Kurt Weill song. Perhaps not all of you know that. This is another Kurt Weill song, which is great. And he takes that song and makes it even sort of darker.
Right. So there are other songs by Kurt Weill that are popular. Yeah,
I think probably the most the other song that is very popular is Alabama Song. I think that's the one. You remember? I don't know whether you remember the Doors, the version of Doors, which you know, it's a long time ago, but it's great.
Right, fantastic. Someone actually picked up earlier when we were talking, kind of in the intro, that you live in southern France. They wondered what the music scene was like in rural southern France.
Well, what is interesting, I mean, for anybody who's interested in jazz, France was always a heaven for jazz musicians. And I think recently we realized that it's very difficult to attract audience in big towns. I think that's the same for Vienna, for Berlin, and certainly for Paris. And jazz musicians realize that if you go to a smaller place, you get more audience. I'm very close to a town called Vienne, and the Vienne Jazz Festival is very, very popular. And what is interesting is not actually the big concerts, but it's the small ones where you can listen to free music, and that has really gotten on in rural, well, in France, and in rural France too, because you've got in my area, which is basically you know, just farms and small villages, you've got at least 15 fantastic jazz musicians who live around here.
Fantastic. That's great. Well, Markus, again, thank you so much for leading us on this fascinating journey. It's been absolutely excellent. And obviously for showing us so much history as well, along with of the places of Germany at the time and coming to America. Thank you so much. It was really, really great.
Well, thank you, and I hope you come over here to Europe very soon with your groups, and you'll be able to see Berlin and Paris and all these wonderful places again. Thank you for listening to me. Thanks.
Us too. Great, thanks. So before we go, I want to let everyone know that our next Encore Live webinar will take place next Thursday, so a week today, on September 17 at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. In that session, we're going to return to Ireland for a behind-the-scenes tour of Dublin's Christ Church Cathedral. In this special event, we're going to hear from Dean Dermot Dunn, who will discuss the history and significance of the church. We're also going to sit down for a question and answer session with Tom Little, Christ Church Cathedral's Director of Music, who's going to introduce us to his choir and perform a few pieces live. So it should be a rare opportunity to see exclusive access into one of Ireland's most remarkable cathedrals. It should be great fun, and we hope to see you all there. If you look in the chat box right now, you'll also find a link to sign up for that event, and we'll also send out an email invitation shortly. But for now, thank you all for joining us today, and until next time, Encore Boston, play us out.